Now we are going to talk about how to identify all of the dependencies in a project. Remember, we're still in the planning stage of the project lifecycle. From the previous videos, we have learned about the project lifecycle that all of the projects have to go through. Then we came to know about how to do the scoping of a project. We learned to use the work breakdown structure and Gantt chart. And in project scoping, we learned that we have to break down all of the tasks related to the completion of a project to the smallest unit. But another thing you need to keep in mind is that different tasks of the project can be dependent on one another. Sometimes one task cannot be started before another has been finished. If you remember the example of a class project in the previous video, you will recall that certain tasks are definitely dependent on others. This was the work breakdown structure that I explained in the last video. Here, if you look closely, you can see that some steps cannot be taken without others. You obviously cannot start a project without visiting the market, since the information gathered from the market is actually going to go in the report. And you cannot do the final editing without collecting individual parts from every single group members. Now that was a little too easy example for this. In real life, no one is going to give you projects that are this simple. Projects are going to be more complex and maybe contain hundred and sometimes even thousands of steps. That is where it is crucial to find out which tasks are dependent on which ones. The task of the IT department might be dependent on the design team, and sometimes the task for the finance team might be dependent on what the marketing team came up with. Marketing team needs to know what the strategies are going to be for them. And in a way, the sales team is also going to follow what the strategy is for the company. According to the strategy, they are going to decide how they are going to reach their potential customers. Now, the burning question is, how do you actually visualize it? Well, there are two ways that I am going to discuss in this video. The first one is design structure method. It is also called a design structure matrix. The reason behind that is because it is actually a matrix. In this method, we use a matrix to figure out which task is dependent on what. In this example, I have just numbered the rows and columns in the matrix. In there, the names of the tasks are going to be included. The cells are going to be filled out depending on the dependencies of the task. Here I am filling out a few cells so you can understand how to do it yourself. First of all, filling out this cell right here is going to indicate that the task number 4 is dependent on task number 1. That means that task number 1 has to be complete in order to task number 4 to start. So task 4 is dependent on task 1. Then we can see that task number 5 also is dependent on task 1 and task 3. Just like that, task number 6 is dependent on task 4. And lastly, task number 8 is dependent on task number 3 and 5. This is how you can use the design structure matrix to figure out which tasks are dependent on which one. This is a pretty simple one. I have only put 8 tasks in this matrix. Once again, there can be hundreds of tasks in a single project, and the matrix will be much bigger than this one. Another way of visualizing the dependencies of tasks in a project is to make a network diagram. It is the simple way of making sure you know which task is going to follow which one. Now in this simple example, we can see that there is a start and finish in a project, and there are a lot of tasks we need to do to finish the project. Now, the beauty of the network diagram is that we are going to put arrow marks to illustrate which task is followed by which one. In this particular diagram, we can see that task number 4 is not dependent upon any other task. So it can be started right after the initiation of the project, and all the other tasks are preceded by one or more tasks. Those were two ways that you can identify dependencies on a project. And that would be the end of this topic for now. I would like to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you learned something new today. And for the bonus part, I'd like to say that the Spanish word for iodine is yodo.